One stormy night in July 2022, driving alone on Highway 17 outside Phoenix, I checked my rearview mirror and saw a man sitting in the back of my ambulance. I'm Laura Mitchell, 33 years old, and I've been running emergency medical calls for Phoenix Metro EMS for 11 years. I've seen overdoses in crack houses, pulled teenagers from mangled cars, and worked codes on cardiac arrests where families begged me to bring back their loved ones. Nothing in my training prepared me for passengers who shouldn't exist. That particular Tuesday started like any other. I was covering the graveyard shift, solo runs only, transporting stable patients between facilities. The storm had been building all evening, typical monsoon season stuff. Lightning split the desert sky every few seconds, and rain hammered my windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. I'd just dropped off an elderly man with chest pains at Desert Regional when dispatch crackled through my radio. Unit 47, we have a priority transport. Pickup at Mercy General, destination St. Mary's downtown. Patient is stable, routine transfer. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 47 en route. I pulled out of Desert Regional's emergency bay and headed back toward the city. Highway 17 was the fastest route, cutting straight through 20 miles of empty desert. No street lights, just my headlights carving through sheets of rain and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating saguaro cacti standing like silent sentinels. The radio had gone quiet after my last check-in, leaving me alone with the storm and the steady hum of my ambulance's engine. I'd made this run hundreds of times. The route was muscle memory. Take Highway 17 north for 18 miles, exit at Camelback, follow the signs to downtown. Simple, routine, safe. The patient bay behind me was empty, cleaned and restocked after my last call. My cardiac monitor was powered down, oxygen tanks secured, medication locked in the drug box, standard protocol for solo transport runs. At mile marker 23, lightning struck close enough to make my hair stand on end, and thunder rolled across the desert like a freight train. That's when I adjusted my rearview mirror to check the empty patient compartment behind me. Protocol: always maintain visual awareness of your patient bay, even when empty. That's what Chief Ramirez drilled into us during training. But the bay wasn't empty anymore. A man sat upright on my stretcher, looking directly at me through the mirror. He wore a faded blue hospital gown, and his skin had the pale, waxy color of someone who'd lost too much blood. His eyes met mine in the reflection, and he opened his mouth as if trying to speak. I slammed on the brakes, hydroplaning across the wet asphalt before coming to a stop on the shoulder. My hand shook as I grabbed my flashlight and turned toward the patient compartment. The bay was empty, completely empty. The stretcher was folded up against the wall exactly as I'd left it. Restraint straps hanging loose, clean sheets tucked tight. No sign anyone had ever been there. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. I sat there for 5 minutes, rain hammering my roof, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. 11 years of emergency medicine teaches you to trust your observations, but it also teaches you that stress and fatigue can play tricks on your mind. I'd been pulling doubles for 3 weeks straight, covering for Martinez while he recovered from back surgery. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations. That had to be it. I checked my equipment systematically. Cardiac monitor, powered down. Defibrillator, charged and ready. IV bags, secured in their brackets. Everything exactly as protocol dictated. The patient compartment smelled of disinfectant and fresh linens, the same sterile scent I'd known for over a decade. My old instructor's stethoscope, the one he'd given me during training, hung from its usual hook by the drug cabinet. Chief Ramirez used to say that stethoscope had saved more lives than any piece of equipment in the fleet. Tonight, it hung motionless in the still air. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 47, static, complete static. Dispatch, Unit 47, please respond." Nothing but electronic snow. I checked my radio's display. Full power. All systems green, but no response from Central Dispatch. No chatter from other units. Nothing. Highway 17 stretched ahead of me like a black ribbon, empty in both directions. The storm had intensified, lightning now striking every 30 seconds, turning the desert into a strobing nightmare of shadows and brief, harsh light. I pulled back onto the highway, focusing on the road ahead. Mile marker 24, mile marker 25. The familiar landmarks passed by, but something felt different. The spacing seemed wrong, like the desert was stretching itself out, adding distance where none should exist. My GPS showed the correct route, but the estimated arrival time kept increasing. 18 minutes became 22, then 26, then 30. At what should have been mile marker 28, my cardiac monitor suddenly powered on by itself. The screen flickered to life, displaying a steady rhythm strip. Sinus tachycardia, heart rate 110. But there was no patient connected, no leads, no sensors, nothing. Just my empty ambulance generating a heartbeat from nowhere. I reached over to shut it off, but the moment my finger touched the power button, the rhythm changed. The rate spiked to 150, then 180. Ventricular tachycardia, the kind of rhythm that kills people. The alarm began beeping frantically, filling my cab with urgent electronic warnings. My hands trembled as I finally managed to power down the unit. The screen went black, and silence returned. Mile marker 30 should have been my exit. Instead, I found myself staring at an endless stretch of highway that seemed to curve into nothingness. The road ahead shimmered like heat waves in summer, but this was a cold desert night in July. Rain continued to sheet down, but now it seemed to be falling upward in places, droplets rising from the asphalt to meet the clouds above. I pulled over again, this time killing the engine completely. The sudden silence was deafening. No engine noise, no radio chatter, no traffic sounds, just the irregular patter of rain that seemed to follow no natural pattern. I stepped out of the ambulance, needing to ground myself in something real and solid. The asphalt felt wrong beneath my boots, too soft, like walking on carpet instead of pavement. That's when I heard it. A voice, muffled but unmistakably human, calling from inside my patient compartment. "Help me." Weak, desperate, barely audible over the storm. "Please help me." I froze. Every instinct told me to get back in the driver's seat and floor it, but 11 years of emergency response overrode my fear. If someone needed help, I helped them. That was the job. That was who I was. I opened the rear doors of my ambulance. The patient bay was exactly as I'd left it. Empty stretcher, secured equipment, no sign of any passenger. But the voice continued, clearer now. "I'm cold, so cold. Why won't anyone help me?" The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the metal walls of my compartment. My instructor's stethoscope began to swing gently on its hook, moving back and forth like a pendulum. Though there was no wind inside the sealed patient bay, I climbed into the back, my flashlight beam dancing across familiar surfaces that somehow felt foreign and wrong. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees. My breath came out in small puffs of vapor, and ice crystals began forming on the inside of my rear windows. in the middle of July, in the Arizona desert. "Where are you?" I called out, feeling foolish but unable to stop myself. "I'm here to help." The cardiac monitor powered on again, this time displaying a rhythm I'd never seen in 11 years of paramedicine. The pattern was irregular, chaotic, like a heart trying to beat but forgetting how. And underneath the electronic beeping, barely perceptible, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Breathing. Slow, labored breathing coming from inside my empty ambulance. I grabbed my instructor's stethoscope from its hook, the metal cold, enough to sting my palm. Chief Ramirez had given it to me the day I graduated from EMT school, telling me it had been with him through 15 years of emergency calls. "This scope has heard its last heartbeat 100 times, he'd said, but it never stops listening. I pressed the chest piece against the stretcher mattress, then the equipment cabinet, then the walls themselves. Nothing but the sound of my own pulse thundering in my ears. But the breathing continued, growing stronger, more desperate. I followed the sound toward the front of the patient compartment, where it seemed loudest. The cardiac monitor now showed 3 different rhythms simultaneously, impossible patterns that shifted and merged like living things. Normal sinus rhythm, then atrial fibrillation, then a systole, the flat line of death, then back to that chaotic pattern I couldn't identify. The machine shouldn't have been able to display multiple rhythms without multiple patients connected. But here it was, cycling through what looked like the final moments of 3 different people. I tried my radio again. Still nothing but static. My cell phone showed no signal, unusual for Highway 17, but not impossible during heavy storms. The GPS displayed my location as a blank gray square with no roads, no landmarks, just an empty space labeled "Location Not Found." According to the satellite, I was nowhere. Outside, the storm had changed. Lightning struck in perfect sequences now, every 15 seconds exactly, as if someone was operating a massive strobe light. In those brief moments of illumination, I could see shapes moving in the desert. Human figures walking between the cacti, all heading in the same direction, all heading toward my ambulance. "I can see you now," the voice said, and this time I knew exactly where it was coming from. The cardiac monitor's speaker. The voice was speaking through my own equipment. "You came back for me." "Who are you?" I asked, feeling insane for talking to a machine. "What do you want?" "You know who I am? You've always known." The monitor's screen flickered, and for just a moment, it displayed something that wasn't a heart rhythm. It was text, scrolling slowly across the green display. "Michael Santos, age 34, cardiac arrest, Highway 17, mile marker 23, July 15th, 2019. I remembered. 3 years ago, almost to the day, a single-car accident during another monsoon storm. The driver had crashed into a drainage culvert, and by the time I reached him, he'd been in cardiac arrest for at least 20 minutes. I'd worked him for 45 minutes, pushing drugs, shocking him, doing everything in my power to bring him back. But some people are too far gone. Some hearts have stopped beating for good. I'd pronounced Michael Santos dead at 11:47 p.m. on July 15th, 2019, at mile marker 23 on Highway 17, the same stretch of road where I'd first seen him in my rearview mirror. "You left me there," the voice continued, and now it sounded exactly like Michael had during those final moments when he was still conscious. "You tried, but you left me there." The memory flooded back with perfect clarity. Michael Santos, construction worker, married with 2 kids. He'd been conscious for the first 10 minutes, scared but coherent, asking me to call his wife. I'd done everything by the book: IV access, oxygen, cardiac drugs, defibrillation, advanced life support, but his heart had taken too much damage. The steering wheel had crushed his chest, and internal bleeding had already stolen too much of his life by the time I arrived. I did everything I could, I said aloud, my voice echoing strangely in the patient compartment. I followed protocol. I tried to save you, but you didn't. Did you? The question hit me like a physical blow. This was the conversation I'd had with myself every night for 3 years. The second guessing, the what-ifs, the crushing weight of wondering if I could have done something different. Could I have arrived sooner? Should I have tried a different approach? Was there some combination of drugs or procedures that might have brought him back? If I answer, I validate what can't be real. If I don't, I abandon my patients again. The cardiac monitor now displayed my own vital signs, somehow reading my heartbeat from across the compartment. Heart rate 145 and climbing. Blood pressure probably through the roof. Stress response in full effect. But I wasn't connected to any sensors. The machine was reading me from a distance, the same way it had been generating rhythms from nothing. Outside, those figures in the desert had moved closer. I could see them clearly now during each lightning flash. Men and women in hospital gowns, all walking with the slow, purposeful gait of people who had nowhere else to be. They formed a rough circle around my ambulance, just standing there in the rain, waiting. Look at them, Michael's voice said. Look at all of us. I forced myself to look, really look, during the next lightning strike. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman with emphysema who died in my ambulance 2 years ago despite oxygen and medication. Tommy Hendricks, the teenager from the motorcycle accident last spring. Maria Gutierrez, the diabetic who'd gone into a coma while I was transporting her to University Hospital. All of them people I'd tried to save. All of them people who died despite my best efforts. You carry us with you, Michael said. Every single one of us. We're always in the back of your ambulance, Laura. We never left. The temperature in the patient compartment dropped another 10 degrees. My breath came out in thick clouds now, and frost began forming on every metal surface. The old stethoscope swung faster on its hook, the chest piece catching what little light remained. I realized with growing horror that I had a choice to make. I could acknowledge that these people, these patients I'd lost, were somehow real and present. Or I could cling to logic and rationality and drive away from this impossible situation. But choosing logic meant abandoning them again, leaving them standing in the desert rain, just like I'd left Michael Santos on a stretcher in the morgue 3 years ago. The ethical foundation of everything I'd built my career on was crumbling. Do no harm. Preserve life. Never abandon a patient. But what do you do when your patients won't stay dead? What do you do when saving someone might mean accepting that everything you know about life and death is wrong? My radio crackled to life, cutting through the electronic chaos of the cardiac monitor. But it wasn't dispatch. It was Chief Ramirez's voice, speaking through static and interference. Unit 47, what's your location? We've lost your signal. I'm on Highway 17, I said, keying the mic with trembling fingers. Mile marker 23. I need backup. Negative Unit 47. Highway 17 is closed due to flooding. Has been for 6 hours. No units authorized on that route. I stared at the radio in my hand. 6 hours. I'd been driving for 6 hours, but it felt like 30 minutes. time had been stretching, bending, breaking down just like everything else. "Chief, I have patients here, multiple patients. They need help." Static filled the channel for almost a minute before his voice returned, smaller and more distant. "Laura, we need you to return to base immediately. Do not engage with any individuals on Highway 17. Do you copy?" The radio went dead. The cardiac monitor's screen went black. And in the sudden silence, I heard all of them breathing together. Dozens of voices creating a rhythm like wind through desert caves. The rear doors of my ambulance swung open. I hadn't touched them. Michael Santos climbed inside. He looked exactly as I remembered from that night 3 years ago, except his chest wasn't crushed anymore. His hospital gown was clean and dry despite the storm raging outside. He moved with the careful precision of someone who'd been hurt but was healing, settling onto my stretcher like he belonged there. "Hello, Laura. You're dead." My voice came out as a whisper. "I watched you die. I know." He reached for the old stethoscope hanging from its hook, his fingers passing through the metal like it was made of smoke. "But I never left your ambulance. None of us did." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway behind him. Then Tommy Hendricks. Then Maria Gutierrez. One by one, every patient I'd lost over 11 years of emergency medicine climbed into my patient compartment. They filled the space that should have been impossible to fill, standing in places where there was no room to stand, breathing air that grew thinner with each new arrival. I pressed myself against the driver's partition. The metal felt real and solid, but everything else had become fluid, dreamlike. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to understand," Michael said. The cardiac monitor flickered back to life, displaying all of their rhythms simultaneously. Dozens of different heartbeats, some regular, some chaotic, some flatlined. Every time you lose someone, they stay with you. That's the weight you carry. That's the price of caring. My instructor's stethoscope began to glow. Soft blue light emanated from the chest piece, growing brighter as more patients filled the compartment. Chief Ramirez had been right. It had heard its last heartbeat 100 times, but it never stopped listening. It was listening to all of them now, even in death. I tried. Tears streamed down my face, freezing on my cheeks in the impossible cold. I tried to save every one of you. "We know." Mrs. Patterson's voice was kind, grandmotherly, the same tone she'd used when comforting her family in her final moments. "But you blame yourself for our deaths. You carry our failure as your own, because it is my failure." "No." Tommy Hendricks stepped forward. He'd been 17 when his motorcycle hit black ice. Too young, too fast, too many injuries for anyone to fix. "My death wasn't your failure, Laura. It was just death. It happens. But I should have—" "What?" Maria Gutierrez interrupted. "Worked miracles? Brought back the dead? You're a paramedic, not God." The cardiac monitor began cycling through memories instead of rhythms. I watched myself performing CPR on Michael Santos, pushing drugs, shocking his heart, fighting death with everything I had. I watched myself hold Mrs. Patterson's hand as her breathing stopped, her family surrounding the stretcher. I watched myself start an IV on Tommy Hendricks while his blood pressure dropped beyond recovery. In every memory, I was doing everything right, following protocol, fighting for them, refusing to give up until there was nothing left to fight for. "You gave us your best," Michael said, "every single time. That's all anyone can do." The stethoscope's glow intensified. I could hear all of their hearts beating in harmony now, a rhythm that transcended individual existence. It was the sound of life itself, continuing despite death, persisting beyond physical form. "We're not here to haunt you," Mrs. Patterson said. "We're here to free you." "Free me from what?" "From us." The temperature began to rise. Ice melted from the windows, frost evaporated from the equipment, and warmth returned to my fingers and face. The patients began to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent, then nothing but shadows and memory. Michael Santos was the last to disappear. He looked directly at me, his eyes holding no accusation, no anger, just understanding. "You saved me, Laura. Maybe not my body, but you saved who I was in those final moments. You made me matter. You made my death mean something because you cared enough to fight for my life." He reached out as if to touch my face, his hand passing through me like warm air. "Stop carrying us. We're okay. We're all okay." The cardiac monitor displayed one final rhythm, my own heartbeat, strong, regular, healthy, the rhythm of someone who was very much alive. The stethoscope stopped glowing. The patient compartment was empty again, smelling of disinfectant and fresh linens. The storm outside had moved on, leaving clear skies and the distant glow of Phoenix on the horizon. I climbed into the driver's seat and started my engine. The radio crackled to life immediately. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. What's your status?" "Unit 47, returning to base." I checked my GPS. Highway 17, mile marker 23. The same place I'd been sitting for the last 6 hours, though my clock showed only 20 minutes had passed. "All clear." "Copy that, Unit 47. Welcome back." I drove back to Phoenix Metro EMS headquarters in complete silence. No radio chatter, no music, just the steady hum of my engine and the whisper of tires on wet asphalt. For the first time in 3 years, my mind felt quiet. The voices that had been haunting my thoughts, the constant replay of final moments and last breaths, had finally gone still. Chief Ramirez was waiting for me in the equipment bay. He looked like he'd been awake for days, worry lines etched deep around his eyes. "Laura, where the hell have you been? We lost your signal 6 hours ago." 6 hours? I checked my watch. 3:47 a.m. I'd left Desert Regional at 9:30 p.m. It felt like 20 minutes. "Your GPS tracker went offline at mile marker 23 on Highway 17. We sent units to look for you, but that section of road was flooded, completely impassable." He studied my face with the intensity of someone who'd been running emergency calls for 2 decades. "What happened out there?" I thought about telling him the truth. About Michael Santos and Mrs. Patterson and all the patients who'd filled my ambulance with their final breaths. About cardiac monitors generating heartbeats from nothing and old stethoscopes glowing with impossible light. But some truths are too large for words, too personal for sharing. "Equipment malfunction," I said finally. "Radio died. GPS went down." I pulled over and waited for the storm to pass. He nodded slowly, accepting the lie, because the alternative was unthinkable. "Take the rest of the week off, Mitchell. You look like you've seen ghosts." If only he knew. I cleaned out my locker that night, officially requesting transfer to day shift. The graveyard runs had taken their toll, and I needed to see sunlight again. Needed to remember that medicine was about healing the living, not carrying the dead. As I packed my gear, I found something that hadn't been there before. A small piece of paper tucked into my medical bag, written in Michael Santos's handwriting from his patient intake form 3 years ago. "Thank you for fighting for me. Your care mattered. All our deaths had meaning because someone like you was there to witness them with compassion. Keep saving lives, Laura. The living need you more than we do. I keep that note in my wallet now, next to my EMT certification card and a photo of my niece. It's proof that what happened on Highway 17 was real. But more importantly, it's proof that the weight I'd been carrying wasn't mine to bear. Every paramedic loses patience. Every person who chooses to fight death will sometimes lose that fight. But the loss doesn't diminish the attempt. The failure doesn't negate the compassion. 3 months later, I was working day shift in downtown Phoenix when we got a call for a cardiac arrest at the Westgate Shopping Center. The patient was a construction worker who'd collapsed while installing new electrical systems. His name was David Chen, and he was 28 years old with a wife and newborn daughter. When I arrived, he'd been down for 12 minutes. I worked him for 37 minutes. IV access, oxygen, cardiac drugs, defibrillation, everything in my power to bring him back. And this time, it worked. David Chen walked out of University Hospital 2 weeks later with a pacemaker and a second chance at life. His wife hugged me in the parking lot and told me I was an angel. I'm not an angel. I'm just a paramedic who finally learned the difference between saving someone and carrying them. Some people live, some people die, and all of them deserve someone who will fight for their life with everything they have. That's the job. That's who I am. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving the empty highways around Phoenix, I catch glimpses of familiar figures in my rearview mirror, not haunting me, not demanding anything, just there, reminding me that every life I've touched, living or dead, continues to matter. The old stethoscope still hangs in my current ambulance, and sometimes I hear it whispering secrets only Chief Ramirez and I would understand. Last week, I got a call for a priority transport on Highway 17. Same route, same time of night, same desert stretching endlessly toward the horizon. For just a moment, I hesitated. But then I remembered what Michael Santos had told me in those final moments of impossible encounter. The living need you more than we do. I turned on my lights and drove into the darkness, ready to save whoever was waiting for me in the storm.